Today's pressure, what do you do when discipleship feels stuck? You've got great people, great content, and faithful leadership, but your church still isn't growing spiritually, at least the way you hoped. Let's talk about why. A lot of pastors I coach ask some version of this question. Why aren't people growing? And it's usually followed by, should we add another group or another class or another fill in the blank? But here's the truth, and it's a truth that's kind of hard to swallow. More programs won't fix a broken path. There is no magic bullet or magic program that you can just add that will be your discipleship pathway. If you have a broken path, that's the problem. And most churches don't even have a path at all. They have a menu. It's like a collection of, good things, but there's no intentional movement attached to them. So when people plateau spiritually, we assume it's their lack of motivation. It's their fault, but it actually isn't their fault. It's kind of our fault because we have a lack of direction for them. So what's the better way? Well, the better way is you need a map. Discipleship's a journey, right? So you need to know where it starts, where it ends, and what are the steps along the way that can help people move forward? When I work with churches, which I love doing, when I coach pastors, consult with churches, discipleship is one of the things that we talk about all the time because it's, we should talk about all the time. It's why we exist. The Great Commission is all about discipleship, and it expands the definition, by the way from evangelism, reaching the people who are not currently found, helping them become found, allowing them to meet Jesus, fall in love with him because Jesus is already in love with them, give their life, put their faith in Christ, and then begin to grow in that relationship of Christ-likeness. That's what discipleship is. It's from not believing to growing to replicating. So when I work with churches, I kind of use a framework like that. It's a kind of a four-pronged framework that begins with lost people being saved. The question I ask all the time is, what are you doing to reach those unchurched, non-believing people in your community? Let's call those people seekers for this conversation. What are we doing to help seekers seek? Now, think about this like a number line for a minute. If I know spiritual growth is not this simple, but if everybody in the world kind of goes from -10 to +10, -10 being like Satan and +10 is Jesus, and 0 is this, a moment of conversion, okay, to faith, to Christ. If everybody fits within this number line, and everybody in your community fits within this number line, by the way, there are people in there who are probably -8s, 7s, whatever, -6s. I don't really know what they're doing or what they're, they believe in something. They have faith in something, even if it's just themselves. But you as a church, organizationally, are probably not going to have a great opportunity to reach a person that far into the negatives. Now, you personally can. I've personally been able to do that, right? You've done that before individually, but corporately, collectively, as a church, you're probably not going to build programs necessarily for that person, at least directly. But when a person gets to be about a -3, all the way to 0, that's really what a seeker is. A -3, -2, -1 person, they're beginning to ask questions. They're beginning to be curious, is the word for this. They're beginning to wonder, what is it like to have what you have? Or maybe they see people in the community who go to this church, your church, or maybe they have a friend that goes there. And they see the way they handle, hard times, tragedy, difficulties, and they begin to wonder, what does that person have that I don't have? They're curious, they're seekers. So the framework begins with that individual. The second group of people in this, we're going to call students. These are now saved people. They've hit that 0 on the number line, but they're only going to get to about +3 as a student. These are people who are saved that are now being pastored by your church. They are, the question maybe we would ask are, where are people learning the basics and kind of forming community in your church, through your church? That's why we call them students. They are learning. Kind of like seekers. They're asking questions and learning. Students are doing the same thing. They're beginning to ask questions. They're beginning to learn. It's really about information. I love conversations with these people, and I love helping churches. I've got to do this before, kind of create environments or experiences for this category of people. It's fascinating when they learn things like David and Goliath isn't just a sports metaphor for the underdog beating the big guy. It's a biblical story, right? So students, that's our second category in the framework. Our third category, and there's four, our third category, we're going to call shapers. Now, the question a shaper is asking is what helps, or we should be asking, about shapers. What helps people surrender more of their life to Jesus? That's what shapers are trying to figure out how to do. These are people who have been pastored enough, but now they're really experiencing, and I'll use the word discipleship, but they're experiencing more traditional discipleship. There's a depth to this that's beginning to happen. Their life, the reason we use the word shaper is because their life is beginning to be shaped after Christ. When you think about a shaper, it really is a person that is beginning to move out of just information into application. Now, it doesn't mean that a person who's a seeker or a student can't apply things. I mean, they are applying things, but a shaper is beginning to build their life around application. And this is really important. Their growth is beginning to be application-based, not information-based. That's the big difference that helps people move from a student to a shaper. Really quick caveat. If you see people in your church maybe becoming a believer or initiating faith, but then they begin to stall and go somewhere else, it could be because you aren't offering shaper environments, that you have seeker and student experiences, but when they start needing application, you haven't either programmed that in or you haven't maybe convinced or showed them that they need that for their next step of spiritual growth. Our fourth category, the last category in this framework, we call stewards. These are people who have been discipled really well, and now they are being mobilized. The question you have to ask is, how are we equipping people to serve and to lead and to multiply? So the framework really is a four-pronged, or I guess columns of people. And it starts with the person. I love that. It's people-centric. Seekers, students, shapers, and then stewards. Now, once you've kind of figured out what that framework looks like, once you've kind of wrestled, those four categories to the ground, you understand the kind of person that fits into them, then we start asking some really good questions. Things like this. What do we offer for people in each phase? I would encourage you to put everything that you do on a whiteboard, maybe with a sticky note, or just write it down. And then, this is really fun, at least I think it's fun, go individual, category by, environment by environment, everything you do, ministry by ministry, and label it. Is it for seekers? Is it for students? Is it for shapers, for stewards? List them individually. Now, you may come across something and go, well, this is for everybody. Well, maybe, but think about it from a business perspective. If you create a product that's for everybody, you kind of create a product for nobody. So everybody may be, for instance, in your church service. You may have all four people represented in your church service, but who is it designed for specifically? Is your church service? Probably not, but is it designed 100% for seekers? Is it designed for only stewards? Or is it designed for maybe a shaper? I don't know. And I have opinions on this. I won't share it now, but you should know who the target is, because something should be feeding into it and then feeding out of it. There should be a step into it, a step out of it. So who is it for? What do we offer in each of these four categories? Second question you have to ask then is, where are the gaps? Let me give you an example of this. When I was leading at Woodstock City Church, and I'll use the number line as an example, I think we were killing it with -3s to +3s. We had so many non-churched, unchurched, non-believing people showing up every week. I mean, you may not believe this, but this isn't a pastor story. This is a true story. We did this thing called Next after church services almost every week. Early on in my time there, it's probably 3 years in, We did Next. We offered Next that week, and I got to lead it. It was just a 10-minute conversation to kind of help you figure out what we are about and what a next step for you could be. We gave everybody a card to fill out, and it had some demographic information on it. As I went through the cards, we probably had 10 people maybe at it. As I went through the cards after the environment ended, I was looking through there, and one of the questions we ask is about their church background or their faith background. I had in that group of people that day and next, I had a Wiccan, a Universal Unitarian, I had an atheist, I had a person who had been in a Baptist church, a couple for 30 years, and I had a Methodist couple. I mean, think about that. They were all sitting in the rows of our church. Now, was our church service designed for all of them? Not directly. All of them were there, though. Back to question one, right? Number two, though, what are the gaps? As I think about all those people, we were killing it in that -3 to +3 space. We were so good in that space. But you know what I found? I found a lot of people were leaving our church after being there for a while. And then a couple of years later, they would return. And, and I would ask them when they came back, hey, what brought you back? And you know what they said almost every time? They said, well, we didn't really feel like we were growing as much here as we kind of wanted to. But then we eventually also realized that we have all of these unchurched friends in our life that we can't invite to the church that we were now going to. So we've come back here because we want to invite them. I didn't really know what to do with that at the time. I have since processed it, and I can tell you what to do. One is it identified a gap for us. We had a pretty big gap at Woodstock City. In my number line example, we had a pretty big gap from +3 to +6. And the reason is that we were really, really great with the information aspects, but we didn't do as well with application. And listen, we had thousands of volunteers. We did mission trips. It isn't like we didn't have any application. But our church was built more on not information, because we certainly preach for application and all that. But when it came to kind of shaping your life after Christ, that's not what we did. So you know what I decided to do? We created a different version of small group called growth groups. We had community groups that were more for connection, but then we also created growth groups that were more about discipleship. When we implemented that, it began to help close the gap. And go back to my story, when people were coming back to church, you know what they were doing? They were actually becoming stewards. And now they were wanting to replicate their faith in the faith of others. They were wanting to reach more people as a believer. And they knew that our church could be a tool in their toolbox to do that. So they didn't need our church anymore to grow. They had become self-feeders, but now they wanted to use our church as a tool to help feed others. I love that. I mean, you can see all four of those categories in that question. So for you, where are the gaps? And here's the last question. What's the next step after every environment? This is one of the most important things I think that we discovered at Woodstock City Church. And it began to really help us grow dramatically. We began to ask not just what is a next step, but we would always then ask what's the next step after the step. I began to ask my staff this question, and I kind of forced us all to identify the next step in every step. We had a little fun catchphrase that we would use. No step is complete until a next step is offered. Now, we can't force anybody, right, to take a step, but we can equip and inspire them to do that. So we would do something called Starting Point. Maybe you've done Alpha. It's a version of a group, a small group experience that lasts 4 to 8 weeks for a person who's a -3 to maybe a +3 at the max. But it's a person who really is starting their faith journey. They're very curious. They may or may not be a Christian at the time. So we had great success with that environment, Starting Point. However, what would happen after Starting Point? That's what began to bother me. So I began to say things like, Starting Point isn't complete until a next step is inspired and offered, right? So now we began to think, just because a person went through Starting Point doesn't mean we're done. And we don't pat ourselves on the back because we had people in Starting Point. If nobody took a step after that, then we have failed them on their discipleship journey. So we wanted to make sure we had incremental things following it. So for you, think about everything you're doing. What do you offer in every phase, every category of that framework? Where are the gaps as you look at that framework? And does everything you offer lead to a next step? Now, here's the thing we have to own, okay? Discipleship doesn't happen by accident, but it does happen when you remove the guesswork. That's what a map can do. So, there are lots of potential action steps out of this conversation, but let me give you one that I would love for you to try to do. I would love for you to audit your environments. Audit your environments with a discipleship lens. Look at every class, look at every group or every program that you offer on your calendar, and just ask this one question. What step does this lead to? What step does this lead to? If the answer is nothing, then it's probably not helping people move forward. It might keep them circling. It may even worse, make them stagnate along the journey. When you ask this question, it really helps you build a map, which then helps you simplify your offerings. It brings clarity to your steps. And remember, this is important. It's not about the pace that they're going, it's about the progress that we're helping people make. So, if you are feeling the pressure to make your church's discipleship strategy more clear, but you don't know where to start, this conversation is a great place to start. But there are some other steps that I would encourage you to consider. One is keep listening to the Pressure Pod. I think that I'm trying to help you think about things like this. This is what I do with churches. Also, though, a couple of other options for you. One, I offer every month a free pressure valve session. We take one topic, one pressure, take 60 minutes, have a live conversation with people just like you, where I lead us through the pressure and give you some options to relieve the pressure. I also dig deep into some pressures with something I call a leadership lab. These are 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 gathering sessions where it's a very limited number of people meet with me and we talk about one topic and we go really deep with it. So maybe it's funding your church. Maybe it's organizing your church. What are the organizational principles that you need as a leader? I mean, there's so many things that we go through. I offer those too on a monthly basis. Just go to gavinadams.com. You can check that out. And of course, if this episode was helpful in any way, man, I'd love for you to pass it along to a pastor who is probably feeling the same pressure as you. Thanks.